Welcome to our 5th Watershed Stewardship webinar, Policies and Regulations. Tonight we have Denise Smead joining us to present. My name is Ashley Smithers and I am with Clark Conservation District. We are a non-regulatory agency that helps a lot of our community members through technical assistance as well as providing awesome workshops like this. On our website we have all of our past recordings of our other watershed stewardship webinars as well as a few awesome amphibian webinars. So feel free to check those out. After this, there will be a survey. Please fill that out. It provides us a lot of great information. And if you do watch the web recording of this, then that survey is on our website and also in the YouTube links below. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead, or actually I have one other thing. If you fill out the surveys, I have a couple of cool swag items tonight. I have a really cool thing about urban livestock, streamside planting, living in rural Clark County. So fill out that survey and you will be entered to win that. And if you watch all of our 5 webinars and fill out those surveys, you will be entered as a official Watershed steward. And I've been kind of holding out on a lot of you guys, but you will get an awesome thumb drive with tons of resources and all of these presentations. And then you will also get like a mug and some other cool swag items. So make sure that if you have missed any of the presentations to watch those online and fill out those surveys. That's the way to let me know that you have watched them. So with that, I'm going to turn the evening over to Denise. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about policies and regulations, and it's can be kind of a dry topic. So if you need me to take a break, just let me know in the chat. Most of what I'm going to talk about is environmentally related and related to Clark County residents. There are things that landowners over the years have talked to me about or run into with environmental regulations or laws, things like that. It's not complete. I don't pretend to have any kind of, hold on, I'm trying to get it to move forward here, but there we go. Thank you. And this is my information. I currently work for the Lower Columbia Fish Recovery Board. Before that, I was Clark Conservation District Manager for many years, and this is where most of my experience comes from. I also do not work for a regulatory agency. We are a volunteer-based agency. We work to recover salmon and steelhead in the Lower Columbia region. And you can contact me anytime with any questions or issues you want to discuss about environmental stuff in Clark County. I'm fine with that too. So first I'd like to tell you a little bit about law versus a policy. We hear a lot of different terms thrown around a lot of times, and a policy is basically kind of standards that, or general principles that guide government in the management of public affairs, things that are a concern for society in general. Those imply choices. So policies usually are handed down from the state or the federal government to a local municipality, giving them kind of choices to make sure they realize this kind of outcome. The laws are usually what comes from those policies. The laws are actually rules. They're standards and procedures that have to be followed. And when we talk about laws, those are usually when you hear about court cases, things like that. I put healthcare policy in here because it's an example of a federal policy that was created at the federal level, but each state could have done it a little differently, implemented it a little differently. So that's kind of how policies work usually. Examples of federal policy are the Clean Air Act, National Environmental Policy Act, and you'll see that all of these have act at the end. And I guess I think that's mainly because they wanted people to act on them. I'm not exactly sure why they have act. But the 60s and early 70s were really active period for environmental policies and laws to come down. We really saw a lot of impact during those times. And I have to put this photo in here. It's in Ohio. The river is literally on fire because of the chemicals and pollutants in it. The river itself caught on fire. So there was a lot of environmental policy going on during this time. Examples of state policy, most of them were also about the same time. So Washington State wasn't far behind in their environmental policies, except for the Growth Management Act. I'm not sure why it took till 1990 to decide to help manage growth, and that it was a good thing to manage the growth. And that came, I think, mainly from the Seattle area, running into the Puget Sound, where they didn't really have anywhere else to go. They're kind of hemmed in up there by that. So it prompted the Growth Management Act. Oregon, for example, they did theirs in 1973. So they were right on board with everybody else, but for some reason it took us a little longer. Codes and regulations are the laws that come from the policies. So the United States will, after the laws are passed, they're codified. And at the federal level, they're codified by Congress. At state, they're codified by our legislature. And at the state level, our codes are also called statutes. So you'll hear that word. And we even have codes that tell you how to implement codes. They're called WACs. So that's what WAC is. And then when you get down to the lower level, the local level, there are also codes, but they call them, most of the time, they call them ordinances as well. So you'll hear all those terms kind of thrown around, but really those are the rules and the laws. And so you'll see stuff in the county, no smoking by city ordinance. The cities will create their own ordinances to make sure they're following those policies. And like the face covering, I put it in here because it's right now we're dealing with this, but the state, the governor basically said, you should be doing this. It's not a law, it's not a policy, it was an order, but cities can still say if they want to do that or not, or force people to do that. So some cities have made city ordinances requiring people to wear face coverings. So there's all kinds of different verbiage for different things like that. The government agencies enforce the laws and implement the policy, although it's not all they do. These are examples of some of the federal agencies that work in environmental policies. For example, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it looks a little dim on the photo there, but they're the ones that manage the wildlife refuges in Clark County. So if you go to Ridgefield National Wildlife Refuge, it's U.S. Fish and Wildlife. You're working basically on federal government land, and they have to maintain that and take care of it. And then Army Corps of Engineers, that red logo there, they're the ones that built the dams, like Bonneville Dam. You'll see that logo on most of the dams in the area. Army Corps is really the only federal agency I've ever seen actually go onto private property. Most federal agencies don't go near private landowners. That's for the state if they have to, mostly the local folks. So the feds don't really want to go on private property, but I have seen Army Corps of Engineer employees go on private property for wetland, mainly wetland disputes. So they are involved in that kind of thing. And you don't really want them to come on your property. It would take a lot for them to come on the property. But here's examples of some state environmental policy agencies that implement environmental policy near you. All of these agencies interact with private landowners. Natural resources, they manage lands, so does WDFW. probably many of you have been on DNR lands or DFW lands for that matter. So they deal with regulations and laws, but they also are land managers usually too. This is an example of a federal policy that was handed down. The Endangered Species Act, you've probably heard it. I think you guys have had the wildlife talks and things with this class already. But the Endangered Species Act is one of the largest, I mean, the biggest overarching like policy at the federal level that we have. It basically permeates everything we do. It's in elements of everything we do: transportation, recreation, housing, industry. And part of the reason is that the plants and animals all need ecosystems to survive, and we're part of that ecosystem. So in the Endangered Species Act, they've included that language in there. So we have to take care of the habitat that these plants and animals are in as well, which includes every agency in the feds. It includes tribes, state agencies, municipalities, local government entities, and landowners. Landowners, whether they know it or not, are dealing with the Endangered Species Act a lot of times. I had to put these pictures in here. These are these are northern leopard frogs being reintroduced into Washington. WSU Pullman has raised them, and they're on the endangered species list. And then the fisher down in the corner, Fish and Wildlife has just released some up in the Olympic National Park, and that's a great success story up there. And the orca, this is an interesting endangered species. It's a small subspecies, really, the Puget Sound resident orca, which eat other endangered species, the salmon. So you've got a lot of things going on with the politics and policies around some animals like this. This is another example of a state policy that really permeates in everything. It's kind of an overarching, well, the name says it all. It's the State Environmental Policy Act. And it really, what it does is it identifies and supposed to analyze environmental impacts associated with government decisions. And those government decisions can be when they're issuing permits to a landowner. The landowner will put together the SEPA, which is what we call it, fill out the forms, and then in the example I'm going to show you, the city of Battleground then takes in those things and says, yes, you know, you're good, we'll give you a permit for this, or no, you need to modify this, or we're going to deny you a permit. So it really is the government's decision whether you can, in that case, like build something if you're going to construct. But they also have to do a SEPA for themselves. And a lot of government agencies do construction, especially recreational facilities, and they have to do a SEPA as well. They have to comply with all the laws that everyone else does. And they also do a SEPA when they're adopting regulations to see if those regulations are going to have an environmental impact. And Washington Department of Ecology is the overseeing agency, so they have the last say. I just wanted to give you an example. Oh, I can't open it. Well, when municipality, I don't know why they wouldn't be able to open that. Let me try again. No? All right. Well, maybe later. The landowner, like I said, in this example I was going to show you, they're going to develop a piece of property, and they're turning, I think it's 5 acres into 139 homes, and it's outside Battleground, in Battleground's urban growth boundary. And the city has the landowner fill out all this information, and then they post it for the public to comment on. They have a hearing on it for the public to comment on. And so these are open for you to look at and see what's happening in land use and development in your neighborhood. You know, if you've got a vacant lot next to your house and you're concerned about what's going to go in there, maybe you want to get on the list for that city or the county. County does it as well, to see, you know, if any SEPAs come through. if anybody is asking for a permit to do something or construct something. So if you are active and want to know what's going on around you, this is a good place to start with the SEPA announcements, basically, from the municipalities. This is another example of a state policy that landowners have kind of run into and interacted with. You need to have a hydraulic project approval, which is basically a permit, if you want to do any activities around a stream, a creek, a river, a lake, a pond, any waterway, essentially. And those activities include things that people normally would just do, I think. At least my experience is, I wouldn't think to remove plants and control plants I would need a permit for, but you do if you're, especially if you're in the water. So if you have invasive species going into the waterway that you want to get rid of, you need to talk to Fish and Wildlife first, and probably the county as well, actually. Log placement, positioning, removal. This is another one of those that landowners have run into if they have a small creek or something, little waterway on their property. Even a drainage can be classified as an intermittent stream. And it depends on what the county says it is, or Fish and Wildlife says it is. And people will get debris in it, and it'll start backing up water on their property. Well, you're not supposed to take that out until you talk to Fish and Wildlife or talk to the county, somebody that knows the regulations around that. I'm not regulatory. I'm not going to, turn people in if you call and say, can I, what about this or that? And most of the time, the county won't either. The other one is the stream bank protection. I have a picture of rocks along a stream bank, and this is exaggerated. I don't know anyone that's put this many rocks, but I do know people that have put quite a few big rocks and things along the stream bank, and that also, you need a permit to do that, and most people don't realize that. So, and of course, water diversions and intakes is another one that people have maybe put in a little rock dam across the little creek, so it backs up and they can, their kids can play in the water and stuff. I've done that, but but yeah, anything in the water, there's a policy there. So I was going to break here, answer questions, see if anyone had questions, and it looks like from the chat that we do.
Yeah, so we have a couple of questions that came through. One of them, there's two that are kind of connected, so I'm just going to throw them together. So one is, how do we get on the SEPA announcement list? And then also relating to SEPA is, how do I find the SEPA activity around us?
I would figure out where you're located, I guess. So usually if you contact the city or the county, and if you're not sure if you're in the Growth Management Act or Growth Management Boundary, sorry, urban growth boundary, or not, because that makes a difference who gets the SEPA announcements. But you can just call the county or the city you live in and ask them at the clerk, just the clerk's desk, tell them that you'd like to get notices for SEPAs, in this area. And sometimes, depending on where you live, they may just say, you know what, I'm just gonna put you on the list and you're just gonna get it all, because I don't want to take the time to just pick out the SEPAs. That's probably what's going to happen at this point. Or you can check back. I know check back to their website. So the county, I know, does this. I'm not sure about the cities because I usually only check the county. They'll have what pending SEPAs are out. I'm trying to think of what to Google. It's under community development. I think if you Googled Clark County, Washington, not Nevada, and put in there SEPA or something like that, it has a list. And then you can look at the cover letter. I can actually get out of this and show you an example if you'd like. Do you want me to show them what it looks like?
How about we do it at the end.
at the end? Okay.
Yeah. Does that sound like a good plan? When I'm also going to share my other thing.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we
I
have,
thought the link worked earlier, but of course it doesn't now.
yeah. Also, who do we contact for Fish and Wildlife contract for environmental issues concerns?
So every region has a Fish and Wildlife office. The Fish and Wildlife office for Clark County is in Ridgefield. It's in the new industrial area in Ridgefield. And if you just Google Fish and Wildlife, I think it's Region 5, it'll give you the phone number to their office. And then you'd say, I'd like to talk to somebody about, removing wood from my creek or something like that.
Okay. And then kind of one other one, I think we should do a little thing at the end with the SEPA because I'm getting quite a bit of questions about that. But what about past SEPAs? Do they have SEPAs from 1988? So do you know how far back they go?
I don't think that far. I would guess the public records would go back 15 years at the most, I would say. But I haven't looked at the public records requirements for those recently. Some records are held in perpetuity, but even if they are held in perpetuity, they probably don't have access to them. They've probably been stored somewhere off-site, either in a different hard drive somewhere, or if they have physical copies, which in the 80s it's probably physical copies, they're probably up at the State Archives office if they are archivable. But SEPAs, I'm not positive, but typically you get on the archives to hold something 10 years, maybe. So maybe not. I doubt that the county staff or city staff person, if it wasn't readily available, I think they would just tell you probably, no, we don't have that. Because they don't have time or energy to go search something out for you usually.
That's all the questions.
Okay. And the SEPAs are interesting. I get them because of where I work. They send the SEPAs out to all the environmental agencies that might have interest in whatever's going on that property. So I always am looking through them just to see what's going on out there. So. Okay, so I wanted to go into a little bit of more into, I guess, water quality and stormwater, because this is kind of where watershed stewards or water stewards is going and based on. So you may have heard some of this before. I apologize for that. But you have to hear it 3 times, I think, for it to sink in. That's what they tell me anyway. So this is one of my favorite little pieces here of the horses. Like fish pee in there, horses get such a bad rap about peeing in streams, so I had to include it. I don't know if you've seen this, probably you have, but I just wanted to give you an idea of why stormwater is as highly regulated as it is, and what it means for stormwater on your property, kind of what you should be thinking of when you're looking at what's coming off of your property. So in a natural setting, you're only getting about 10% runoff. In the urban setting, I guess you could call it, it's 55%, which is really a large amount. And the other concerning thing is that the infiltration into our groundwater aquifer and things like that. So it's an important aspect to be able to recharge the aquifers, to supply people water for their wells and things like that. But also the runoff creates big problems when it's on impervious surfaces, collecting all of the stuff that's on those surfaces, all the sediment with it and everything else, and taking it somewhere else. So this is the precipitation map for Clark County. And it only goes till 1990, but I still think it's pretty relative. I looked up what the average rainfall was for Vancouver in, I think it was last year, 2019, I believe, and it was at 42 inches. So I think that's pretty fair. That looks about right to me. So, Clark County, you go up into the hills, you're looking at, well, probably Yakult's getting 100, it looks like. And up toward the river, you're getting into the 80s, that kind of thing. So there's quite a bit of rainfall for us. So you could look on that map and kind of see where you're at. And then we're gonna do a little math. So 1 inch of rain can produce 62 gallons of water, basically. And that's on a 10 by 10 structure. So that's like a shed, essentially. And I want to see if, I want to give you this math. I don't know how we can do that. But you should go back to your place and figure out what you potentially have for a roof. So this is a 30 by 30 structure, and it produces 558 gallons from 1 inch of rain, which is significant. And we got, last year, I looked it up, July was our lowest amount of rainfall at 0.8. So you're still looking, and most average structures are more than 30 by 30 roof square footage. So this 30 by 30 roof square footage is about 900 square feet for a 30 by 30 roof. The average house has a 1,700 square foot roof, which is significantly larger. So it's producing a lot of stormwater. This stormwater has to go somewhere. So I don't know, Ashley, how we can, I want to be able to show them the math of how I got here, but maybe I can just type it in an email to you sometime.
Yeah, or there is the option that you can switch to screen share, and there's a whiteboard if you want to like draw it out.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay, so
I don't know, is anyone interested in doing that? See how I got this? I was gonna do a 42 inches, which is the average annual rainfall, on a 1,700 square foot roof and see what we come to.
I guess let's give people like 10 seconds, right? If you have strong feelings about yes or no, or we can just type it out and have it in the follow-up email. I'm not getting any responses. How about yeah, I'm getting a no.
Okay, so, yeah. We don't need to.
Yeah.
Math is not good. Yeah, I usually have to have a calculator, of course. But I will tell you that I did the math. So on an average roof of 1,700 square feet at 42 inches of rainfall a year, you get 44,506 gallons of water. So 44,500 gallons. It's a significant amount. So when we talk about stormwater and why it is regulated, because it's a significant amount of our life. It's got drinking water impacts, health impacts. It's got aquifer ecosystem impacts. So it's up there in those regulations for sure. Okay, so like I said, stormwater started out with the Clean Water Act, and it went to the federal's program is the non-point discharge elimination system. You don't need to know that acronym, but just so you know, it goes down along the lines here, and everybody gets a piece, and this says this says this, you got to implement this, you got to do that. So in this process, there's a stormwater permit for those cities and counties that are of a significant size. And I believe the federal government determined that size. We have 4 counties in the state that have a phase 1 stormwater permit. That's the highest amount of regulation you can have on a permit. Can anybody guess which 4 counties? I'll give you one, King County, obviously, right? That's Seattle. Anybody want to guess the other ones? No?
We have Clark County, and then Spokane.
Actually, yes, Clark County is one of the four. So one of the four counties that have a phase 1 stormwater permit. Spokane does not. So it's King, Snohomish, Clark, and Pierce. So those are the four. And that's usually, Tacoma, I think, is in Pierce, if I'm not mistaken. And Seattle and Tacoma are the cities, the only two cities that have a phase 1 permit as well, because it's for counties and cities. So Clark does have a phase 1 stormwater permit, so they are under more regulation than other counties in the state, except for those four. So phase 2, which is kind of I want to say a lower permit, but it's just you don't have as much regulation because your population is lower. We have a few cities in Clark that are under a phase 2 stormwater permit. Anybody want to guess? I'll give you Vancouver. There's 3 others. There's 4 cities in Clark that have a phase 2 permit.
Camas?
Yes, Camas is one. Vancouver, Camas.
We don't have any other guesses.
No other guesses? So I figured someone would guess Ridgefield, but they actually don't. Their population, they don't have 10,000 people yet, but Battleground does, and Washougal does. So Battleground, Camas, Vancouver, and Washougal are all cities that have a phase 2 stormwater permit. And I'm mainly telling you this because those cities and the county are under more strenuous restrictions and minimum requirements for their stormwater. So just so you know, if you're living in one of those cities, well, if you're in Clark County, which all of you are, if you're not in the city, So one of the things that the cities and counties do to help them with stormwater management is to implement stormwater fees. And those fees go toward, let's say the county in this case, for them to manage basically your stormwater. So all of those gallons of water that is coming off of your impervious surfaces, all your driveway, your house, your shed, the sidewalks, the roads, all of that, the county has to manage it, and they can't let it get contaminated and go into our creeks and things. So obviously they can't do that without some assistance, so they've implemented stormwater fees. So I've put them up here. Clark County has like the lowest, one of the lowest stormwater fees in the state, and yet it's at a phase 1 permit, but it's very inexpensive. And these rates are based mainly on 3,500 square feet is it like a 1 unit. And then the difference in price there, or cost, I should say, is if you're within the urban growth boundary or outside the urban growth boundary. So the other cities on there that are in our phase 2 permits are all pretty close. Washougal, I think they must be doing some more stormwater stuff than maybe some of the other cities are, I would hope. A lot of these fees go toward the roads and sidewalks if you live in an urban center. So when you're out driving in rural Clark County and the roads aren't great, well, Clark County does not charge much for their stormwater fees to take care of those roads. Clark County actually has been sued, that I know of, at least twice over not meeting their stormwater permit requirements. They enacted the stormwater fee long ago when they got sued the first time because they weren't enacting they weren't doing the permit minimum requirements, and they lost, so they enacted the stormwater fee. And then in, I think it was 2015 or 2014, maybe somewhere in there, they got sued again because they were not meeting the minimum requirements of their stormwater permit. And at that time, the county bumped up stormwater fees another $5 to cover that lawsuit. The county was told that they had to put in $600,000 a year for 5 years to do stormwater activities, to try to get back some of what they haven't been doing. So that ends, I think, this year or next. But once the lawsuit timeline ended, they took the $5 fee back. They canceled it essentially. So now they're right back to where they were. I'm not sure how they're going to meet their stormwater requirements now if they couldn't before. But anybody want to guess at what Snohomish, one of the other 4 phase 1, what their stormwater fee is?
Anyone have any guesses to put into the chat box? $20, $5. $15. I feel like an auctioneer.
It's $35 a month. So significant. Yeah.
Yeah, we had somebody say, wow, which my jaw dropped.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important. It's an important thing. And I think that's why I mention it too, because landowners, all you do, you see these fees on your tax bill, and you don't know what they go for. And why would you? I mean, I didn't until I, was part of this. So they're important aspects to keeping clean water and aquifer recharge, which I'll get into in here in a minute, and some other things. So they're important duties that the county should be providing. So. Oh, this is a map of Clark County, and I don't know how well you can see it, but I can give it to Ashley as well. But it shows the city limits in the darker kind of taupey color, and then the urban growth boundary as well. So it gives you an idea whether if you are living in Ridgefield and not sure if you're in Ridgefield or if you're in unincorporated Clark County, or if you're within the urban growth boundary of Clark County, or of Ridgefield, something like that. I know my parents live down 179th across from the fairgrounds down there, and their address is Ridgefield, but they don't really live anywhere near like the Ridgefield city limits. So sometimes it's a little hard to know whether you're in those city limits or urban growth boundaries or not. So I just included this to give you an idea.
Denise, were those fees per month or per year, did you say?
Oh, those were per month. I'm sorry. Those were per month. Sorry, I didn't have that on there, did I? I need to change that for next time. So like I was saying, local stormwater, you've probably all seen this. Everything that goes into the stormwater goes into the streams. And also I wanted to put this, even though it's not a very good photo, of a stormwater catchment pond. A lot of the housing developments around the county, a lot of them are maintained by Clark County, but they don't have the staff or people to do that. And they are trying to educate some of the homeowner associations and neighborhood associations to take care of them and know how to maintain them and things like that. But many of the stormwater management ponds that are out there aren't doing anything for the stormwater, essentially. They might be holding it for a while. It might be recharging the groundwater a little bit, so that's something. But they're not functioning as they should for the most part. So erosion control is one of the issues that we have with stormwater. and impervious surfaces. And I put this here. This is like an average house. You've got a 2,500 square foot barn, a 2,000 square foot house. You've got driveway. All of that adds up to a lot of water. And there's a lot of sediment and contamination that goes into that. And then off the streets, of course, you get a lot of the roadway stuff. And the clearing of the native vegetation I have on here as well, because a lot of the sediment that gets into the water, if there's no vegetation to hold that soil there, to suck up some of those nutrients, it goes into the streams. So I wanted to just remind people that we talk about stormwater, but really it's a lot of policies are combined. There's no just like, this is one regulation. So if you're having, you know, erosion problems, or you're working around a creek or something like that, you know, there's probably multiple agencies and multiple regulations that you're going to deal with on any one thing. You know, fish and wildlife, because of the fish are there. You can deal with fish and wildlife if you have an oak savanna, or you have a white oak on your property there on the threatened list. But you could also be under some stormwater regulations. So I just brought this back up to show that there's not usually one thing. And a lot of times, if you have questions, calling your city or the county, wherever you're living, is the best option. And just trying to figure out how to do something, or you know, who you have to talk to. The conservation district is also a really good source, because they know a lot of people, and if you have a question and don't know who to talk to, a lot of times they can figure out who to call. I had to put a fish picture in there too. So. And I wanted to mention also the stream side that's on there. A lot of erosion on stream banks like this is actually from surface water. It's from runoff. There's not a lot of vegetation, so the roots aren't getting low. The water is coming off the impervious surfaces, off the house and the barn and things, and going across the surface. It's permeating a little bit and then coming out and going into the creek, and it's eroding all of that fine sediment there on the creek. So when you look at this, it's not just the creek taking that, it's the stormwater as well. Any questions before I move on into that?
Yeah, I was just answering one, but can landowners develop channels to drain properties into a river without a permit?
No. Well, see, the thing is, if you're doing anything with a waterway, so in that scenario, you'd be putting stormwater into a waterway. So you're going to affect the water quality of that waterway. It could be perfect water, and you would still need to get a permit, because you're going to affect the water quality. That's the idea. One of the things I want to make sure I mention, and yeah, there's these regulations, but if you see a neighbor doing something, you can call the county if you live in the county, and you know, go to code enforcement's website, and you can fill out a form there to complain. They won't accept any complaints unless you give them your name, the complaintor's name, and the address and what they're doing. So you're not going to be able to remain anonymous if you're making a complaint. However, that's really the only way I have seen any action come of someone doing something to a creek or waterway, is through a complaint. So if your neighbors aren't seeing you do any of that, then the county's not going to know, and Fish and Wildlife's not going to know. But if you have a neighbor that can see you doing something, it behooves you to talk to someone at the county, if that's where you're at, or the city, or Fish and Wildlife. And if you call them and, you know, who do I talk to for this, or who do I talk to for that, and see if you can get somebody, and just say, okay, this is kind of what's happening. You don't have to give them your location. You don't have to necessarily give them your name, but just ask them, you know, is this okay or not? And what do I have to do to make it okay? or go for it if you don't have any neighbors. I didn't say that.
That's all. And we have, and it's 7:48, so we have a little bit more time just for time check.
Okay, well, I'll whiz through these pretty quickly. I don't have much more. I just wanted to touch on water rights, mainly because I've gotten questions about people using rain barrels to collect all that stormwater. And if you have to have a water right for it, and you don't, you need a water right though if you are using any amount of surface water. So if you have a pump like this one with a sprinkler from the creek, you have to have a surface water, you have to have a water right to be able to do that. You can't pump water from a pond or a stream or anything like that unless you have a water right. And you need a water right if you're going to use your groundwater, your well, if you're on a well. If you're going to use that for, I always like to put this in here because people don't understand, I don't think either, for a small farm. So Clark County has, I think they're number 3rd in the state for number of small farms, and it's great. It's a wonderful thing. I personally have CSA stuff too. But there are laws around using the state's water. So all the water belongs to Washington State. It's a public resource. So when you're using it for commercial purposes or on more than what regulation says, then you're supposed to have a water right, which is basically a permit to be able to use the state's water. And you can use it for stock water, so you can water your horses with it, that kind of thing. And if you have a house, so a lot of developers get by without a water permit or a water right because it says that you can have group domestic uses. And so they just put in enough houses to stay under, I think, that 5,000 gallons a day kind of limit, and they don't have to get a water right. So all those houses that go in are pulling up groundwater, putting in wells if they're not on a utility. If you're in CPU or something like that, you have a utility, then you don't have to worry about any of that. The utility actually has the water rights. The utility carries those. You don't need a water right to collect rainwater. However, it does have to be used where it's collected, so you can't take it off site. You can only collect it from existing buildings, so you can't build a building just to collect water from. And then it can't negatively affect water rights in the area. So I don't see this happening, but you know, I have seen enough ground wells to affect water rights. But anybody collecting rain isn't going, I would assume, to collect that much. I mean, you'd have to have a large amount of buildings to be able to affect a water right, probably. I want to mention critical aquifer recharge areas. It is in Clark County, we do have recharge areas here. So it's something you want to consider looking into if you're doing some construction work mainly. But just know that they exist, that our aquifers are critical, and especially in Clark County because we have an EPA designated sole source aquifer. So EPA is the one over our drinking water, the Safe Drinking Water Act, 1974, I believe, back into the early 70s again. EPA designated the Troutdale Aquifer under Clark County, and I hope you can see that there. Those are the boundaries of the aquifer. So almost all of Clark County people, anyway, are on one aquifer. All of our drinking water comes from that one aquifer. So when there's any kind of federally funded project, transportation usually has some federal funds in it, that kind of thing, they have to go through this other regulatory program, I guess it is, to make sure they're not affecting our drinking water because of the aquifer. There are watershed plans, and in these plans, they have a lot of activities that organizations like the Conservation District and others like myself are doing in your watersheds. So they're general though. It's kind of like, you know, the Conservation District can do a habitat plan for you, you know, kind of thing. But those are there. They're on our LCFRB website in the library. Yeah, some reading there for you. So I'm moving on. So the one thing I wanted to mention too, the Habitat Conservation Ordinance is a Clark County code that basically says you need to have a permit if you're anywhere in these designated habitat areas. And this is just the riparian part. So there's other habitat areas. Like I mentioned before, sometimes it's around a white oak. It could be around a bald eagle nest. I think they're still listed. But this is just the riparian because we're talking about water. But oh, I do actually have non-riparian habitat on there. I'm sorry. So priority species, depending on what those are. So it's not just riparian. But if you are doing anything in a within 100 feet of a fish-bearing perennial stream, you may have issue with the county. If you're taking out plants, even if they're invasive species, if you're doing it in one of these riparian habitats or even the non-riparian habitat, you're taking out vegetation, the county might need to hear from you. Or if a neighbor says, oh, they're cutting down all these plants, the county is gonna come out and say, you know, you can't be doing that. You need to stop and you need to do something else or fine you or whatever it is they're gonna do. So keep that in mind, that there are habitat areas that have restrictions. This is an example of how to know if you have habitat areas on your property. This is from the Clark County Maps Online, and I think you guys have looked at that already in something else. But this is wetland area. But to look at the property, if you were standing out there, you wouldn't know it, but it's mapped as wetland. Here's another example where this is the Bosma farm that Clark College is taken over. This is over here on the left is the Park and Ride Ridgefield. Well, the farm has a lot of little waterways on it and habitat area. And you can see over here, priority habitat and species on the right in the legend. You can see the species areas. There's a little bit of the hash marks over on the right side of the map. So you've got some issues there, and then you've got the wetlands all through there. So that's something you have to consider when you're working out there. I know you guys got some information on noxious weeds, but that also is a law, and there's ordinances around those. You probably know the lists of the A, B, and C's and what you have to take care of on your property. And again, I do want to mention that if you are in a habitat area, sometimes even if it's a blackberry or an ivy or something, if you're taking it out, you still could have issue with Clark County, because it's a habitat area. And yes, that blackberry is not really providing great habitat, but it's better than bare soil a lot of times. And Clark County looks at it as you're taking out what's there for habitat. But if you do want to do that and you do want to work in those areas, contact the Conservation District and they can do a planting plan for you of the native vegetation you can put back once you take out those plants, and how to take those out, site prep, mowing, spraying, those different kinds of things, and what to put back when and for what. Say you want some more butterflies in your riparian area. The Conservation District can help you plan for that, and then take that plan to the county, and the county can say, okay, hey county, I am taking out vegetation in my riparian area. I am, but I'm putting in a bunch of this native vegetation that's going to grow and create some beautiful habitat. And here's my plan. And I've never had the county say no for that. So. Okay, that's all. Did I make it in time? I don't have a clock in my room.
Yeah, we have a couple minutes to spare. So I'm gonna switch over really fast and share my screen and just share a little, I think this is it.
Do I need to stop sharing?
Nope, I got it.
Okay.
So you guys should hopefully, Denise, verify, but you should be able to see my screen and see that.
I can.
Okay, so this is our website that I've talked to you all about and multiple times. And so if you guys go to this website, you might have gone to it to register for this, but I have been putting up all of the past classes. So you can go in here and you can take the survey to let us know that you watched it, and you can watch this video. So I just wanted to make sure you guys all knew about that, and I'm hoping in the next couple weeks to populate this with some of your guys' questions and answers. And any questions and answers that I might get through email that seem great, and then also add some resources to that. So I am gonna stop sharing my screen, and then if you would like to go ahead and share your screen again, great. There you go. But if not, that's okay. So I just wanted to also let you all know that we have some awesome, we were talking about noxious weeds, and I forgot to mention this during the plant one if you joined us for that one, but we have a whole bunch of awesome resources for different plants and how to deal with them. And the cool part is they're in Spanish and English. So yeah, so if you habla español, you can get one of these as well. And then I think we have a couple of more questions, so we can do that, but make sure as you guys are exiting to fill out the surveys and be entered to win some of these cool things. And then, like I said, if you enter surveys and attend all 5, then I have some awesome swag and you become an official Watershed steward. So I'm gonna go ahead and let's see, I have a question. Where do you find if your property is grandfathered with a water right for the river?
Well, water right is a use it or lose it kind of thing. So if you do have a water right, you would know, because you'd have to fill out information every year and turn it into the Department of Ecology saying that you are still using it and what you're using it for. So it's a use it or lose it. So you know if you have one. If you are looking to get one, it's a first in time, first in right, or something like that. There's a long list. You can only get one if someone gives one up most of the time. Most watersheds are closed pretty much for water rights at this point, at least in Clark. So you'd be added to a list of other people that want a water right. And I don't know what the time frame is for ecology to get to those. So. Okay.
I want to be mindful of people's time, and so we can go ahead, if you need to get going, just make sure to fill out that survey, but if it's okay with you, Denise, maybe we can stay on a little bit longer, and if you wanted to reshare your screen and go over some of that SEPA information, maybe we can take a couple of minutes to do that.
I just wanted to show what it looked like on like a cover page of one, so they would know what to look for.
Yeah, so if you wanted to go ahead and share your screen again, you can actually share it to just that document. And while you're pulling that up, we just had another question that came in, and that is, have you ever had a conflict between tree conservation versus stormwater treatment wetlands that has become overgrown and looks like a wet forest? Not 100%.
Well, I know that a lot of the stormwater facilities get overgrown, and just succession the way it is, it will be filled in eventually with trees and shrubs and things like that. It depends on how the stormwater facility was built, whether that's okay or not. Most of the time, it's not, because the way the stormwater facilities are made, they're designed to filter and have the water sit there for a certain length of time. And usually with those, it's not. Those plants are taking it up and that kind of stuff. So it's, it would depend on the stormwater facility.
Mhm.
I
And I
think.
know we had a really awesome webinar with stormwater facilities, and we had just Jordan Washington from the city of Vancouver come and do an awesome presentation, which he
Great.
does put together presentations. So if you're in the city of Vancouver, he puts together presentations for HOAs, small businesses or businesses, and I think even like maybe even individual homeowners. So if you're interested in that, you can check out our webinar, as well as, you know, contact me and I can definitely point you in his direction. It's a lot of really good information. And I know like one of the things that I talked a lot about in that webinar was just how, you know, amphibians do, in some scenarios, they create habitat for amphibians. And so it's a cool opportunity to utilize that. But I also did a lot of research on that and published a paper. And one of the things that we noticed was how regular maintenance is kind of important, because they can get overgrown to a point where the wildlife and the water, it's just not filtering and doing its intended job. The wildlife, like, it gets too dense for like amphibians to use, and so by just kind of kind of digging it out and stuff, and doing some maintenance every few oftens is necessary for some systems. They're designed, there's like a ton of different design systems. So
Yeah, was that the question? I'm not sure if
I
that.
don't know. I thought it was fun information.
I know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Um,
Yes, there's conflict between habitat and those stormwater facilities as well.
yeah.
You know, I'd like them to be habitat for amphibians, but some of them just aren't designed that way.
No.
And you have to take out the habitat for the stormwater facility to work, which is sad. But
yeah, so it's complicated, but I know that I'm working with Jordan, and hopefully we'll get another one, and it's sounding like that's really popular. So to just kind of get some more information beyond just Vancouver too. So do you have that to share right now?
I think so.
Okay.
So here's one from the city of Battleground. It's last year's, but I just pulled it up on this spreadsheet or slides, I'm sorry. So they have a cover letter, which is what this is. It's a notice of application, public hearing, and likely SEPA determination of non-significance, which they automatically say non-significance because that's just what they say. I'm not exactly sure why. So they're utilizing this process. It says there's a comment period for this notice of application. It may be the only one, but they're inviting you to submit your written statements for the record. They also are inviting you to attend a public hearing. The location is a parcel number, so you can go on Clark County Maps Online. And I don't know, Ashley, did you guys cover Maps Online?
I'm not sure, but I did put a link in the chat box for everyone.
Okay, because we can do that too if you want, but so the description is on there as well, and they're proposing single family homes on 33 acres, and then they give where they're gonna gain access from, so what streets. So if that looks like your neighborhood, then oh well, maybe I want to read that. So this will usually have, this is the cover letter, like I said. This has a map of a location map essentially, and so the boundaries of this are the parcel itself, are those black kind of dashed lines, so they kind of come in. So let me see if I can write on this. It's not going to let me do that again. Oh, I used to have a little tool, but anyway. So the boundaries kind of go around another piece of property there. So I hope those neighbors know what's happening behind them. But this is within the urban growth boundary of Battleground, and kind of outside of the rest of the city. But you'd see the lots go up to the property line. So there's other people on the left side of this. There are parcels that these houses now are going to abut right there. So they'll have a row of houses in the subdivision, and it'll have, it said it had a stormwater facility in it, I think, and a park, something like that. Let's see, it has, project includes open space for critical areas, 2 parks, and 2 stormwater detention ponds. So, and it says where they're gonna gain access from. So you can expect, if you live in that neighborhood, to have a lot more people with 139 housing units and 2 parks, a lot more people coming through your neighborhood. So you can, comments are, they always have a deadline, of course, but you can get your comments in, you can go to the public hearing, and tell them how this is going to affect your property, that kind of thing. So.
Awesome. So with that, we thank you guys so much for coming to hopefully all of the Watershed stewardship classes and the class tonight. There will be a follow-up email, so look forward to that. And if you're watching this via the recording, make sure to fill out that survey to get credits for being a Watershed steward. Feel free to contact me if you ever have any questions, or if you want a site visit to go over any of this information. I am available. And yeah, so thank you everybody for joining us tonight.